In this CBT nugget, site resilience and DAGs. You know, DAGs are just amazing technology to me for if you've been working with Exchange, especially for a long time. You know, if you worked with it back in the 5.5 days, wow, have things changed. And DAGs to me, the database availability groups are one of the greatest things that the Exchange team has ever created for high availability features, and it certainly helps us out a lot. And we want to take a look at DAGs again, and DAGs from a site resilience kind of aspect, and how you would deal with this across sites, how you would deal with it, and we'll even do a demonstration of it. But let me just shut up and show you what the agenda is. I'm so excited about DAGs. So what I want to do is a quick DAG concept in review. In other words, I don't know how long it's been since you've looked at the excellent Greg Shields videos or how often you get to work with DAGs, but just a quick kind of overview, conceptual kind of overview. Then we talk a little bit about the quorums and how we determine whether a database becomes active. This includes cross-site kind of stuff. And then we want to spend a little bit more time talking about database copies and lag copies and how you might want to think about planning these, especially between, well, let's take two sites, for example, how you might want to plan those across. And then, well, we'll just make a DAG. What do you say we make a DAG just for old time's sake? Old time's sake? Well, you and I never made DAGs together, but we'll make a DAG just for the fun of it. So here we go with the DAG concept in review. So just some DAG in review. Now kind of keep in mind what we have going on here. I've got a mailbox role and it's got one or more databases on it. Let's just put a couple of databases on it. Now let's put 3 databases on it and we'll just number them 1, 2, and 3. Now obviously the risk is if I have a single mailbox role running, I've got all these databases on it that are holding my mailboxes. If anything at all goes wrong, I'm not providing service to my user. Remember, it gets back to where we started a couple of videos ago in this course on service to the user, that whole service availability. Well, now the Exchange team over the years has worked with a lot of different technologies to eventually come to the database availability group. And I'm going to just draw out a simple representation. We're going to put in a couple of more mailbox roles. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a DAG. And what a DAG lets us do, and a database availability group allows us to do is decide to make copies of these databases. And so database 1, I can put a copy over here, and I should call this like server 1, server 2, server 3. On server number 2, I can put a copy of database 1, and I could even have a copy over to database over to server number 3. How many of these total can I have? And you may remember that you can have up to 16 of these. People say to me all the time, is this what you would call a zero backup strategy? Yeah, which by the way doesn't mean that you don't make a backup for archival reasons or for whatever. It just means, wow, you've really lessened the need to ever go to a backup at this point. And you do the same thing with database number 2, make some copies of it, and database number 3 to make some copies of it. And if you remember from the excellent Greg Shields course, what happens is that some of these are marked as active. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark on server 1, database 1 is active. Maybe on server 2, database 2 is active, and on server 3. Now you can have them all active on one server. It's just, look at it this way. Instead of the old days of an active passive cluster, where the active was doing all the work and the passive wasn't doing anything. Look at this. Now you've got 3 different servers. Each one of them is doing work for your users, supplying information. The other ones are copies. Now what happens is during a failure, let's pretend for a moment that number 1, he fails. Well, if he fails, obviously the passive copies are, the secondaries, number 2s and number 3 that's on server 1. We don't have to worry about. They're already active on other servers. It's this guy right here that all of a sudden has to become activated. Now, we have an active manager that determines that knows, has a whole list of criteria, the phase of the moon, the time of the day, plus things like the most up-to-date database, the most consistent database, and will decide between server 2 and number 3 which one of these will become active. And it'll activate it for us. Boink. And if you worked with Exchange 2010, I got to tell you, my results were, it took a few seconds, you'd get it active. You know, the user would never know, but you could sit there with a stopwatch. And under Exchange 2013, my experience has so far been, don't even bother with a stopwatch. It just happens really quick. And so this activates our databases for us. This is an excellent, excellent, excellent thing to do. You can do this with 2 servers. You can do it with 3 servers. And each one of these servers can be in their own site. So you could have a site. Let's pretend that this is an Active Directory site. I'm going to draw a small version of this. I could have another site over here. It has the same thing in it. It has a couple of mailbox servers that are a part of this DAG. And as a part of that DAG, we have databases over here, and these can be activated as well. This is our DR site. This could also have active databases running on it so that it's an active site. This is the active and active kind of site. This is all a beautiful thing. So site resilience becomes really easy. If I have copies of all of these databases, at least one set of copies over here, then I've got site resilience as well. There's a little bit more complexity built into all of this, and that's kind of what we want to dig into. First of all, a couple of little notes about this kind of setup with DAGs. You probably remember this when Greg Shields talked about it, but you know, each server's got to be a member of the same domain. Everybody's got to be running the same OS. So whether you're using 2008 R2, if you're using Server 2012, that kind of thing. Also, while, you know, in my virtualized environment that I'm using, I've got 1 NIC in every single one of the servers. In reality, you probably want 2 to kind of separate that replication traffic from that MAPI traffic. I mean, none of that is really all that earth-shattering when it comes to setting up a DAG. One of the problems that we run into, and if you've been doing clustering for a while, you already know this, but one of the problems we start to run into is this thing called a quorum. I want you to think about this. Take a look at this current picture. I've got 2 different sites right now. Let's pretend for a second that this is LA and this is New York. Total number of servers and databases that I've got set up is 5. Well, what we need to decide whether a database can be active or not is that it needs to be part of the majority. A quorum is simply a set of voting rules. And I'm going to talk more about this in a second, but it's just a set of voting rules. And I want you to think about this. If the primary site right now went completely offline, out of the 5 servers, there's only 2 left. That's below the majority, which means neither one of them are going to become active. It would actually have to be something you'd have to force it to go in and do. Whereas if this secondary site over here went away, take a look. Out of the 5 servers that I have up and running, I've got 3. That's a majority. It knows that it could be active. Now, one of the ways that we solve this is that we use a witness. And we're going to talk about this witness a little bit more. If you've set up a DAG before, you set up a witness. The witness is a voting member. Now, really, the witness was designed for, and this is going to be weird, was for a 2-server situation. This was to make it real cheap on like small businesses where they had 2 servers and you wanted to have a DAG between the 2. The problem is if one server fails, we don't have a majority in order to activate him. So to prevent problems like split brain and all that kind of stuff, there is a witness, which is a separate box that can be a voting member. Out of the 3, I can get now 2 votes, so I know who to activate, that one, if one dies, and it's okay. So we need to kind of deal with this quorum and this witness as we start to design what could be multiple sites. The important thing out of this is DAGs are basically copies of your databases on multiple servers. And unlike previous versions of clustering, these DAGs allow you to activate databases on different servers to break up the load. That's just huge. It's incredible. And if you worked with it in 2010, it's very similar to how it is in 2013. And even the site topology is. Now, one little note, because I'm going to mention it again, but I want to get it while I'm here. All servers have to have 500 milliseconds or less round trip time. That's important when you're looking at this WAN area here between sites. So you want to keep that in mind. Okay, so we got a kind of the, well, probably a little bit more than you needed, but the whole DAG concept in review. Let's talk a little bit more, and we already started it. Let's talk a little bit more about quorums. I want to dig a little bit deeper on quorums, especially when it comes to site resilience, because this can actually really matter. So here, let me do this whole little picture. Well, not over again. Here's a mailbox role, and it's got a database on it. Not a big deal. And you know, if that fails, we're done. So we put in a second one, mailbox 2, put a database copy on it, put it in a DAG. Life is all good. Now, in between these guys, they have a network cable. And there's a little, well, I was trying to draw a heart, but that doesn't look like a heart now, does it? Not, well, no, not at all. But at any rate, there's a little heartbeat that thumps, that they hear each other, so they could tell whether whether one has failed or not. So if this guy is running the active database, my second one here is listening at that heartbeat, and if the first one fails, he knows there's been a failure. But there's kind of a small challenge to this. Now, usually, you guys know that we want to have same OSs, that kind of stuff, but we got public lines for communication. And this is what everybody is talking to the Exchange servers on. We have our heartbeat line. Well, I want you to think about something, though, real quick. What happens if this heartbeat fails? If the heartbeat fails, server number 1 might still be working. It might be servicing the public, but server number 2 doesn't hear the heartbeat and could suddenly think that, well, maybe I'm in charge and I need to get to rocking and rolling. And well, this would be bad because the two databases then would become out of sync. This is known as split brain, and we can have this in basically a 2-node setup, or when we look at multiple sites, we can run across this issue of split brain. And this could not be good. This could not be good at all. So just to let you know that Exchange 2013 has built into it, if this was your environment, has something built into it, and we're going to mention this several times, has built into it the data center activation coordination protocol. I'm going to see if I can spit that all out. And by default, what it does is it prevents servers from coming online unless all members, they've been able to get a heartbeat from them. Now, you can enable this, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but in this case, it's good that they will not activate. Or at least the remaining server number 2 will not activate just because a heartbeat went away. So what we need here to solve this kind of problem in real life so that we can tell whether the first primary server has failed or not. Just because we lost a heartbeat, we should still have some resilience going on. So what we introduce into this, and this has been around for a while now, if you've been working with clusters, we introduce a witness server. Now, keep in mind that a witness, and I'm going to draw my witness down here, you don't want to put this on like a client machine. Clients go away from the weekend and they turn off their computers, all that kind of stuff. Here's what a witness does. A witness is monitoring that public side and can tell whether or not, if the heartbeat should fail, what this second server does, checks with the witness and sees if the witness can still see and communicate with the first server. If it can, well, then it knows not to get started. This is a majority in the quorum. In other words, I want you to notice that I've got 2 servers, and without a witness, if one failed, there's only one server that's going to be active. That means 1 out of 1, that's 50%. Well, that's not a quorum. Well, look at what a witness does. If this server actually fails, I've now got this server with a vote and this server with and the witness with a vote. That's 2 out of 3. He knows, server number 2 knows that he can now activate his databases and life is good. Well, this concept now in a larger scale when it comes to multiple sites and maybe a disaster recovery site is the same kind of concept. We have some options, though, on how we set this up. Let's take an example here. We'll start off here by clearing my screen, and we're going to draw this kind of over again, and we'll increase the scale. It's pretty much the same thing, though. So let's get some mailbox roles out there. I'm going to get 3 of them out there, 1, 2, 3. And, we could have a ton of databases. I'm just going to draw one as a representation of what we're doing. And these are copies of all the same database. And let's do this. This will be one site. an Active Directory site. Now let's go make a disaster recovery site, or it could be just a secondary site all the way around. And it's got databases and all that kind of good stuff. So let's get that up. Well, take a look and take a look at the members that I have here. In between here, I have this WAN link. And I want you to think about something. Let's pretend for a second, you know, if I lose one server or two servers, I'm going to be able to recover just fine. I'll be able to activate databases that have been copied somewhere else to a different server in the DAG. Everything's going to work fine. But I want you to kind of consider this. What happens if I lose the WAN? I've got a problem. I've got a small problem. Is that the heartbeat that's crossing between those servers has stopped. Now, I want you to notice that I've got 3 to a side. I don't have a quorum on either side, so nobody gets to activate in this case. I remember I've got my DACP protocol running here, and this is nobody's got quorum, and nothing is good because we can't get a heartbeat going. So what you're going to want is a witness. Well, I'm going to take the primary site, and let's call it the primary site, primary. And let's try this out. A lot of folks will put a witness over here in their primary site. Now, this is great because if the entire secondary site should fail, and I'll put a little X by it and we'll pretend that the entire secondary site failed, then we're good. Notice I've got 4 votes going. I can activate databases. We're in business. And so everything is really good. Now, if I get rid of this, let's just cross him out. Well, not cross him out, scribble him out. If the primary site were to fail, notice the secondary doesn't have enough of a quorum to start. Now, in this case, you could have an alternate witness set up, and you can set up an alternate witness and get this site then to be able to mount its databases. So it is possible to deal with this. Let's go back to our original scenario here. And our sites, we've lost our WAN link. And in this case, I want you to notice that because of DACP, here's what's going to happen. I've got enough votes in the primary site to start to have my databases running, but I've lost the heartbeat across here. Because of DACP, which is disabled, what that does is that protects us from split brain. Considering these 2 sites, the split brain issue. And so neither site is comfortable getting started because it can't see the heartbeat across the WAN link. As a matter of fact, in real life, this often occurs. Let's say you've lost a site altogether, and usually that WAN link goes down. Well, these servers have a tendency to start up before the WAN link does. So what we don't want is that these databases over here to activate till we understand the status of the ones that are running over here. And what that DACP prevents us from is this split brain from occurring. Now, this can be enabled. You can enable it with the set database availability group commandlet. So you can turn on DACP. But the idea being is that we want to be a little bit careful about how these guys are going to start up. Sometimes what folks will do is do a manual startup. Now, I want to show you something else that you could do with your witness for your quorum. Notice that in all of my scribbling that's on the screen is that, and as a matter of fact, let's go ahead and we'll clean this up here real quick and make it much more simple. Oftentimes, it's just easier to delete and start again. So here's my 2 sites once again, and I've got a WAN link in between them, and I've got my mailbox roles in here. And so in the last one, I had a witness here. Well, a lot of folks, what they'll do is they want the witness on if they have a 3rd site, what they'll do is they'll put the witness out on a 3rd site that has connectivity to all 3. That way, and let me just put in, I've got 3 over here and 3 over here. If something should go wrong with a site, let's say that the primary site should fail, notice that the secondary site has communications to a witness and can have quorum. Now, the cool thing about this is that it doesn't require any Exchange stuff being installed down here. Remember, a witness is simply, well, as you're going to see, because I'm going to do a quick demonstration here in a little bit, a witness is just basically a box with a share on it that we can connect sessions to. So a couple of different places you can have your witness located, which would be either internal to the site, like we had started out with, and if you want, you can have an alternative witness in case of a primary site failure. Also, you can have your witness located out here. And keep in mind that DACP protocol prevents things like split brain from occurring. And the design of your DAG actually becomes much more stabilized this way, which is a good thing. We're not going to be doing, we're not going to be corrupting databases or anything like that. Now, speaking of databases, you know what I get asked quite, oh man, that's what we need to talk about now. Is we've been talking about things like quorums and stuff like that, and what the concept of a DAG. How many databases do I need to have good protection? And I think there's this thing called lag copies. We want to take a look at that next. Probably one of the most asked questions I get is, I've got a DAG and I've got a database. How many copies of that database do I need? I don't know. How many do you want? It boils down to this concept of, how bad's the failure going to get? So Microsoft gave you some options in here. And let's go with the most minimal one. Here's a mailbox role number 1, and I've got a DAG set up, and he's got a database on him. We're going to keep it real simple right now. Database number 1, and mailbox number 2. Now, of course, I should have a witness out here, but we're going to keep it pretty simple right now. And he's got a copy of database number 1. So this is the active one, and on mailbox 2, there's a copy. Is that sufficient? Is that good enough? I mean, if I lose number 1, I'm cool. I still got a copy that can activate. If I lose number 2, who cares? Number 1's got it. Life is good. Sometimes yes. You may need more copies, and that's what I want to kind of show you. In a lot of recommendations, it goes to at least 3 plus a witness. That's to prevent, multiple failures. And really what I have to say is that for most, if you're using shared storage or RAID, 2 is good enough. But if you're using one of my favorite things, JBOD, which is just a bunch of disks, and you're not using RAID, now don't panic because I said that. It's actually really cool this way. I don't mean cool as in it's just fun. I mean it is very effective for IOPS, that kind of stuff. If you're using JBOD, usually you want to step this up to 3 as a minimum set of copies. One of the things you have to watch out for, though, is this is your normal runtime. It's not a big deal. But what happens if, I don't know, you get a virus, you get some kind of corruption? What if it affects data for a couple of hours? It doesn't take a server out, it just corrupts stuff. So there are a couple of things that you want to watch for. First of all is just typical database corruption. So if you have the option of corruption, which could be from a virus, could be some kind of logical corruption, such as the data gets modified in a way that the users do not appreciate. Now, you've got some things like single item recovery and stuff like that to help you with that. But there's also something else I want to talk about. What if you have rogue admin? So between things like corruption from viruses, which is the most common, or if you have like a rogue admin that goes in and deletes some data inappropriately that would not be good, how do you bring that stuff back? Well, Microsoft created the concept of a lagged database copy. And the one nice thing about, and I'm going to put another server up here, server number 3, and he's going to have a lagged copy of this number 1 database. And a lagged copy, it can go back in time to up to 14 days. Now think that through. In other words, we can go back in the log files and play them back up to 14 days in the past. So if you have something that happens to you that corrupts your databases for a couple of hours, that's okay. You got this lag copy to protect you. This is a protection mechanism. It protects you from rogue administration, from the database corruption. It gives you site resilience, and that's one of the things I want to show you. Not just the resilience within a single site, but it gives you additional resilience across sites. If you think about this, think about what your backup, your actual backup software is doing. For a lot of us, we're backing up so that we can recover within this kind of 14-day window should we get corruption. This is what a lagged copy does. So you got to admit that's pretty cool, right? So we've got our basic lagged copy capabilities along with our DAG. Now, how do we want to deal with this kind of in scale? So if we want to do this across sites, how many do I need? Well, let's kind of go through the minimum kind of stuff that you would need, and then really, jamming it on. So let's see here. Let's do this. Let's make a new screen, shall we? And we'll just do this from scratch. So here's the way that I usually look at it so how many copies of a database do I need based upon site? So here's site number 1. Here's site number 2. Now I'm going to kind of give you the normal kind of Microsoft Express way of doing this, and then kind of throw in my kind of thing. At minimum within an Active Directory site, you want to have at least one database copy between servers. So if I'm going to have a DAG, that DAG is going to go across, and I'm going to have at least one copy of the database. Now, as you can imagine, I'm just going to draw a line in between these sites here. If site 2, if it's active on site 1 and site 1 goes down, site 2 can come up. Now, we're not dealing with the witness right now, but we would have to put a witness in here for the quorum votes that we talked about earlier. Now, that's fine and that's dandy, but I want a little bit more redundancy. Maybe site 1 is where most of my users are hitting, and I want site 1 to be the primary site, so I'm going to designate it as kind of the primary. And site 2 is more of a disaster recovery site. Well, you can imagine that what you're going to want to do is have at least 2 copies of that database on 2 different servers. Now with 2 copies, that way you have the immediate site failover. So users wouldn't be affected by performance, by crossing the WAN to the second site. You've got high availability features in your first site, and then you still have the DR site. Everything is good so far. Now, if you wanted to activate both sites, have active databases in both sites, rather than just primary and DR. So let me get rid of DR. And let's pretend now that he's actually going to be a full active site too. Well, if you're going to have active databases over here, then let's put in another server and another copy. You're going to want to have 2 and 2. Again, you're going to want to have a witness, but you're going to want to have 2 and 2. This way, the users going to site 1 have high-speed failover should something go wrong. The users working in site 2 will have high-speed failover if something should go wrong. Now, what I like to have is, remember we were talking about that whole corruption thing? As good as my virus protection is, and I know I'm not hiring any Snowdens, but there may be some rogue admins out there somewhere, but I'm probably going to want a lag copy. So I'm going to want to put in, and I'm just going to put in the word lag here. I'm going to like to have some resilience here by having a lag copy. Probably at both. So what I want you to notice is I got 2 sets that are going to be my active and failover, and I've got myself some lag copies. I like this setup a lot for 2 active sites. Again, if it was just a primary site and a DR site, we kind of, you would have this kind of cut in half. You wouldn't have all of this extra stuff. You would just have one database over there. So I like this a lot. Now there is one thing that I want to consider is this is great depending on your storage. When I work with JBOD, and here's the thing, I don't know if you know a lot between RAID and JBOD. I think you probably picked it up from Greg's stuff. But a RAID 5, whatever kind of storage you have, like it be a SAN or just a shelf on RAID 5, you know that your hard drives, we're talking about the physical hard drives, if you lose a hard drive, you don't care. It's not a big deal. Server doesn't go down. You probably don't even know it except for the blinky light. You slam in a new drive, it regens, life is good. That's what most people do. Well, most people. Not everyone. Some people have really jumped on to JBOD. Microsoft uses it. I've used it with a lot of customers. JBOD is just a bunch of disks. What it is, it's a bunch of high-speed disks directly attached to a server. And Greg Shields talked about this in the prior Exchange course. JBOD is high-speed storage. You get the most IOPS out of this, and there is no RAID. Now, as soon as I say that, you know that if you've got multiple disks attached to a server, there's no RAID on them. If one disk goes, you lose the entire logical volume. And most people would go screaming from the room, right? No, there is absolutely no way we're going to do this. Well, this is kind of the point though. If I want to set up high availability, I don't want to spend $1 million on this. I don't want to be out there buying all these giant EMC, and I don't mean to pick on EMC, but I don't want to buy these giant SAN storage things that may be restricting my IOPS anyways. I don't want to buy these giant shelves and spend all this money when I can take just a bunch of cheap disks, put them together, and make the server go. Now the drawback to this is that the mean failure time of a disk might impact the fact that this server, let's pretend that server 1 is all JBOD, this server is probably going to fail sooner than what you think. I mean, you think about this. Servers rarely, the server hardware rarely fails, but the drives usually fail sooner. Well, you're in a RAID, it's not a big deal. If you're on JBOD, this whole guy goes away. So you're going to have a mean fail time of the entire server based upon your disk. This is when people go, well, this is why I'm not going to do it. I don't know. The money savings and the IOPS improvement means that you could do what I prefer to do. And if I'm using JBOD, I'm going to have a lag copy in each site. Or if I'm just working in one site, I'm going to have a lag copy. What I'm going to do though is put in that third server. That's all 3 servers are using JBOD, and I'm going to put in a third server over here. They all have the database copies on them. That's just to compensate for what might be a more often hard drive failure. So I can lose a server like I've done in site 1, and basically instead of freaking out, I kind of yawn and say, yeah, we can get a new one and set that up. Piece of cake, no problem. We still have 2 left for failover in this site. Get it? So if I'm using JBOD, because of that mean failure time of the drives, I have a tendency to use 3 servers that could become active at any time plus a lag. And in the second site, if it's active, it's the same thing. 3 servers that could become active at any time plus a lag. Kind of cool? Oh, come on, I think that's kind of cool. Well, that's kind of good planning, but I tell you what, I don't know about you, but if it's been a while since you set up a DAG and set up a witness, before we end this, why don't we go ahead and set up a DAG and copy a database, make a witness, just so that we can see it all put together once again. So I think it'd be a great idea for us to do a DAG in review as far as setting a DAG up. Now, if you jump right out to TechNet, and you're going to see all kinds of instructions on to pre-set up permissions for the witness and all this kind of stuff, which is, they're all correct instructions, but you may not even know why you're really doing it and what these steps actually mean. So what I want to do is I want to try something with you. I'm going to show you how to set up a DAG twice. The first way, I'm going to show you how to do it wrong. Now, wait a minute, before you get upset and start to fast forward or something like that, the reason I want you to see how most admins will do this, because I want you to see the most common error message. And when you see the most common error message, then I'll show you how to fix it. And those steps, if you look them up later, will all of a sudden make a lot of sense to you. Now, before we get started, I do want to point out that you can do all of this through PowerShell. But I'm going to do it graphically because I want you to see the concepts as we're going along. But let me just open up my Exchange Manager here, and let me just show you. If you do like a get help on database avail, and that's where I'm going to stop. They're the database availability group commandlets. You can do gets and sets and news. You can do all of this through PowerShell, and it's all in the help files, that kind of thing. So I just wanted to point out that you can do it. As a matter of fact, because we'll do this one after we get done. Database availability group, right now we don't have one, so there's nothing there. The other thing I want to point out is the test commandlets like test replication health. This is a good one right now, because watch, I'm going to test replication health, and notice I get some failures up here. Of course I have failures. Look, MBX2, it's failing on database redundancy, on a database availability. Of course it's failing. We haven't even set it up yet, so well, okay, I thought that was funny. Anyways, you get the idea. So you can do it all through PowerShell, but tell you what, let's go ahead and do this graphically, which means I'm going to launch a browser and I'm going to get signed in to the ECP. So let's see here. I think I still have my, if you watched earlier, the CAS load balance setup, but we'll just go direct here. And I'll type in the password. Now, right now, it's really small on my screen. The reason I started this out really small on my screen is a small resolution here is because I wanted you to see where we're going to go here is servers. So I'm going to click on servers. And there's all my servers, but we're going to spend our times here, database and database availability groups. Now, let me go ahead and zoom back in a little bit here so it's a little bit easier for you to read. So databases. Now, right now I have the default databases that were created. I think it'd be more fun if we made our own database. What do you say? And we'll make that one part of the DAG and copy it. So let me see here. Let's make a new database. What do you want to call this? Oh, I know. Let's be really creative, right? Database. Wait a minute, I can't even spell it. Database one. How about that? Now I'm going to choose what server I want it to go on. I'm going to put it on MBX1, and then we'll copy it later. So let me just kind of bring this guy up here so we can see him. I may have to maximize him. There we go. MBX1. Okay. Now, as you can probably recall from the Greg Shields videos, or at least let me remind you now, the database path and the log folder path must be the same on all of them, on everything that's going to be a member of the DAG, and I'm going to have it mount this database. So let me go ahead and say save, and it'll go out and it'll create the database for me. Now there's going to be a message that pops up, and this is something that I noticed, especially with Exchange engineers coming from Exchange 2010, kind of confuses them a little bit. And when it pops up here with the creation of the database, you'll see what I mean. It'll only take it a second here. Anyways, it confuses them, and what I want to make sure is I show you how to deal with this. We're going to get our message. There it is. Now notice what it says. Before I click OK, it says, please restart the Microsoft Exchange Information Store service on MBX1. And I just want to point out, one of the reasons that you're doing this is that starting in Exchange 2013, the information store is multi-threaded. Rather than having just one thread over all databases, which means if a thread should lock up, you lost all those databases. Now it's multi-threaded, a thread per database, which means if a thread locks up, you only lose one database. That's pretty cool stuff, I think. But in order to get that thread for our new database, we have to restart the store. So there's two morals to the story. One moral is, well, no, there's only one moral to the story. The moral is create databases during a maintenance period when you can restart the store. That's one. And two, let me show you how to do that really quick. I'm going to click OK, and I'll open up my console once again. And what I'm going to do is, let me just show you. I'm going to do get service, and I'm going to show you how to find this real quick. I'm going to say name, and I'm going to say is Exchange. Notice EXCH star. And I want this from computer. It's on your mailbox role. So if you're sitting on your CAS box and you run this, well, here, I'll show you. It's not going to work. You're not going to see the Microsoft Exchange Information Store listed here. You're only seeing the services for the CAS box, and that confuses people. So make sure that you're looking at your mailbox role. Now, if you want to use PowerShell remoting, like invoke command or enter PS session, that works fine too. As a matter of fact, that's kind of what you normally do. But here it is, Microsoft Exchange Information Store right here. And the name of the service is MS Exchange IS. So tell you what, let's simplify this. Let's get just that service and see its current status. So it's MS Exchange IS, and we'll run it. Notice the service is running right now, and I want to restart that. So I'm going to clear the screen, bring that line back up, and show you. Here's how I restart it. Just pipe it to restart service. And waiting for it to stop, waiting for it to start, lock and load. And if you just want to check on it again, let's see here. It'll come up and it'll say, I'm running. There we go. So it says it's running. Awesome. So I've restarted the service. Life is good. Well, what do we do now? Oh, yeah. We were making a DAG. Let me clear the screen here. Minimize this. So now I've got an extra database. Now it's time to go here into the database availability group section. So notice we have no DAGs yet. And remember, this one I'm going to do incorrectly. So let's go ahead and make a new database availability group the incorrect way. I'm going to hit the plus sign. That part's actually correct, where it says new. And it's going to come up, it's going to ask us for, what do you want to call this? Well, let's see here. I'm going to call this, what do you want to call it? Do you want to, I know. Don't call it DAG1. That's not creative at all. But that's what I'm going to do. It also tells you over here, if you're looking at the message, the name it tells you use this field to type in a valid and unique name for the DAG. The name is equivalent to a computer name and a corresponding cluster network object, which will be created in Active Directory. I want to point something out. One of the things is if you look at TechNet, they'll have you pre-create this object. But if you don't pre-create it, it still gets created anyways with the name of the DAG. So I've got the name of the DAG. I'm going to need to put in a witness server. Now, good news, bad news. Good news is this. If you use an Exchange server, this works really easy. All you have to do is put in the FQDN of the witness server that's an Exchange server. You will have no problems. So what do I mean by an Exchange server? Well, a lot of folks like to use a CASBox as a witness server, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's cool. In my case, I'm not going to use a CASBox. I want to use another server on my network. For whatever, remember what we said earlier during the design and planning phase, please don't use a client. Please, please, please. Because they'll turn them off and that kind of thing. Since I'm going to use a different server, and it's not an Exchange server, this is where I'm going to run into a problem. Now, first of all, let's just go ahead and do it. I'm going to use my domain controller. That's the only other box I have available. So I'll use dc.company.pri. We want the FQDN. And then we need to give it a directory. Now, this is a directory that actually sessions are going to get connected to that the servers can check to see if a server is online. So I'm going to say say witness. Yeah, that wasn't creative either, but witness is going to have to at least spell it right. I think I did. And I'm going to give the database availability group an IP address. So 192.168.3.90. Now I'm going to go ahead and down here and I'm going to click save because I want you to see what's going to happen here. I'm going to click save. He's going to try to make it. And what he's going to do is he's going to try to go to that witness and create that directory. And he comes up with this message. Look at this message. Look at the message. The Exchange Trusted Subsystem is not a member of the local administrators group on the specified witness server. Access is denied. Now, there's a couple of things that happen in real life with a lot of Exchange admins. At this point, they go, oh, heck with it. They just say, okay, and they just move on. And they realize someday in the future that their witness isn't actually functioning. That would be bad. The other thing is oh my God, go ahead and Bing or Google or whatever your favorite search engine is, go ahead and look this message up. You will go down so many rabbit holes it won't even be funny. This message means exactly what it's saying, and it's an easy problem to fix. Take a look. Exchange Trusted Subsystem is not a member of the local admins group. The Exchange Trusted Subsystem is one of the groups, one of the security groups in Exchange, so it needs to be a member of the local administrator group on the witness server. Now you know how to do that. You go into computer management and you go into groups and you grab the admins group and you add this in from Active Directory. So you need to, add it in from Active Directory. Now I'm going to show you the same thing. I'm going to say okay, but there's a little bit of difference here in mind. Now one of the things is I don't want this DAG anymore because we're going to make a brand new one. So we're going to trash DAG1. And I'm going to flip over to my domain controller, the thing that's going to be my witness server. Now, I have to tell you that in my environment, since I'm using this, I'm going to go into Active Directory users and computers. You guys know that domain controllers, they don't have local accounts. So usually what you would do is you'd go here, computer management, and you would go into the users and groups and go into the groups and add in the Exchange Trusted Subsystem. However, I'm on a domain controller, which you should not be using a domain controller as a witness. It's just all I have available in my environment, my little lab environment here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the administrators group that will have permissions over this machine, which is the built-in administrators, and do the same thing. So I'm going to go in here, go to members, and I'm going to add an Active Directory group. So from this location, whoa, out of control. I don't even know what caused that to happen, but I guarantee there's not a group called that. Anyways, so it's called the Exchange Trusted. Let me see if that's enough here. I'm just going to hit check names. There we go. I'm going to say okay. Ta-da! 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 That's all I needed. That's all I needed. So I'm going to say okay. And now I'm going to go back and we're going to set up a DAG one more time. And this time we shouldn't get the error message. So let's click on the plus sign. And I don't want to call it DAG1 again. I want you to see that this is brand new. So let's call it, well, let's get really creative, my DAG. There we go. And once again, the witness server, which is dc company.pri, and we'll give it a directory of what I call it, witness. Yeah, let's call it witness. And 192.168.3.90. We'll say save, and we'll see if we get that message this time. Dun, 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 dun. Look, look, look. It worked. We made a DAG. I'm so happy. Here's the important part. If you get an error message, don't just assume it's going to fix itself. And a lot of admins unfortunately did. And this same error message happened in Exchange 2010. If you worked with 2010, you might remember that. But if you use a box that's not a member, that's not that doesn't have Exchange installed on it, you got to give the Exchange trusted subsystem permissions to that witness. Well, now it says I got a DAG, and it says I've got a witness server. Everything is good. Now all I need to do is I need to add the physical mailbox servers as members. Right now, if you look right here, there are no members listed. So I'm going to go up here and see this guy with a little gear on it? That's the DAG membership. Now you go in here and you add the servers to the DAG. Now this is probably going to take a couple minutes when you do this. So I'm going to go up here. I'm just going to grab them both. I'm going to say add. Now to be able to say okay, I got to maximize this because of my screen resolution. There it is. And I'll say okay. And now what's going to happen is I'm going to say save. And what's going to happen is, and you can see as he'll run through this on your screen for you, is he's going to install the Windows failover clustering service. Now keep in mind that Exchange, while it does install that service, it does have it for a couple of things. We're not really fully utilizing that Windows failover clustering service, and don't ever use the Windows failover clustering service manager, you know, the management tool for it, to manage Exchange. I know some of you coming from 2007, Exchange 2007, you may have done that. Do not do that on a DAG. That would be bad. We do everything through Exchange, either the graphical or you can do it through PowerShell, but don't play with the management services. So as soon as he gets finished here, cha-ching, he finished. Notice I got my two members in here now, and life is good. If I go down here, I can see on the right side my DAG members, MBX1, MBX2, got my witness server, my DAG network. Everything is cool. All I need now is to, oh, I got to copy those databases over, right? So let's go back to databases. And I want to show you something. This is kind of a gotcha. Let's see here. And so there's database 1, and I want to make a copy of it. Right now it tells me servers with copies, and it's on MBX1. Well, that's not sufficient. I want to use that DAG, and over on the right gives you the same information. So, you know, you can sit here and go, well, wait a minute, there's the edit, there's the trash. I don't want to trash it. There's where where's the copy? Keep in mind, see those three dots? There's more stuff under there. And here's the gotcha. I just clicked on it, and it says dismount. This is where a lot of admins graphically doing this goes, I can't find the copy, and they'll go out and they'll Google for a couple hours and blah, 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 blah. I want to save you all that. First of all, if you were working with PowerShell, you will not have this issue because obviously PowerShell commands will work just fine. What we have here is a screen refresh issue, and that's all that it is. So notice right now it says dismount. What I'm going to do is I'm going to refresh this up here. I'm going to go back down to, oh, wait a minute. Now I have to zoom out. Let me zoom out real quick so I can get back into servers. There we go. Servers, zoom back in so you can see. And I'm going to go back to databases, and I'm going to click on that, and oh, see? Add database copy. That's what you're looking for. It's just a refresh problem. So easy fix. So I'm going to do an add database copy. Database 1, specify the mailbox server that I want it to go to. I want it to go to MBX2, and I'm going to have to maximize this so I can say OK. And then down here, it's activation preference. Well, where do I want it active? I want it to activate on number 1 is where I'd like it to be, but then server MBX2 can be activation preference 2. And I'll go down and say save. And guess what it's going to do? Yep, it's going to copy it over. So a couple of things. Now, if you're doing this on a set of really, really, really slow VMs, this is going to take a while. And of course, it depends on what you have in the database. So in real life, remember the size of the database, you've got that transfer that has to occur. Then what's going to happen when it gets to the other side is it's actually going to test this. It's actually going to spin everything up. It's going to then make sure that everything's working. It's a cool process to watch. And as soon as he's done with this, he'll do that process, and we should have a DAG working. Let me click close. Close. And let's see here. Looky, database 1, MBX1, MBX is on those hosts. It's copying it. Now, I'm moving pretty quick here, but let's see here. Healthy and healthy. Yay, healthy, healthy. And you can see here real quick that through the graphical, if you wanted to, you could suspend, you could activate it here. Things here though. Let's get database availability group. Hey, let's see how we're doing. Oh, now you can see. Now I've got my DAG. It shows me the member servers that it's up on. And you can send this to a format list star, FL star, to get all the information about your DAG, when it was created, that kind of stuff. Everything that you need to know. So you can build your kind of own reporting. Let's do this. Let's do a test replication. And I'm moving pretty quick with these VMs. So let's see what he comes up with if we get healthy, 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 healthy and happy. And oh, just about everything is done and everything. But you know what? Take a look. There's still some databases that haven't quite, it's not fully done yet, getting everything set up. So let's give it a minute here and we'll check it again just to make sure. In fact, let me clear my screen. Whoops, clear screen, CLS, there we go. And we'll try it again. Like I said, I'm moving pretty quick on my VMs here. So let's, hang on, we'll try this again. See what he says. Everything's passed. So once you have all your databases, all of them redundant and available, notice my test replication health shows that everything is now passed. Now, one thing I want to point out is notice it's showing MBX1. You can use this in, say, identity and say, well, check MBX2. This is a great checking tool. Now, if you've got a database out there that hasn't been made redundant, you're going to get failure messages. So that's kind of the point, is to tell you that you don't have redundancy completely set up. In this case, all my databases are now redundant on a beautiful DAG. Oh, there was one other thing I wanted to show you before we move on and wrap up for this. Remember I was saying that if you followed the TechNet instructions, it had you create a computer object and has you set up the permissions for your witness, and you may not have even known why you were doing it. Well, what we did in this section is we started it off the wrong way so that you could see the error message, and you went out and set up permissions. Let me just show you once again to remind you. Remember in administrators, we put in the Exchange subsystem group? Well, okay, but here's the thing. Now that the DAG is built, I also said that it would automatically create, and I need to hit refresh up here. So let me hit refresh because I haven't refreshed it. It'll automatically, there, see, look, my DAG. It automatically created that virtual computer account for my DAG in there. So when you're looking at TechNet instructions and it says go create this and then set these permissions, understand that if you do things, you can do them that way, or if you do things properly and you set the permissions up, it'll automatically create that computer object for you. So lo and behold, I've got a beautiful DAG. I've got a beautiful DAG. It's all set up. So, and we even talked about doing this as not just 2 nodes, but across the site. You can test this. One rule to keep in mind, and this will be the last point, and then we'll kind of review and wrap up for this particular video, is that make sure that in real life you don't just use commandlets to test your replication. You actually test it by doing a failover. And I mean by doing a failover, I don't mean by going down here and click on activate copy, although I do that. But I mean, walk up to a server and jerk the plug right out of it, just to make sure that everything is working exactly the way that you want to. And if you're doing multiple site DAGs, and you're doing or a disaster recovery site or a secondary site, make sure you fully test it so that it is failing over the way that you expect it to fail over, just to make sure that everything's been designed and configured correctly. Awesome. Well, what do you say we do a review? DAGs in review. You know, I keep saying DAGs all the time, and I wonder where my sandwich is. But anyways, DAGs in review. So what we did is you know we've added to this. We first of all we did the concept in review of DAGs. If you haven't worked with them in a while, DAGs to me are one of the most beautiful things in the world, technically and for as a high availability feature. If you set up DAGs and of course load balance your CASs correctly, I mean, you really have a pretty bulletproof environment. And so we went through everything, both on multi-site and all that kind of stuff. We looked at the quorum, making sure you had the right amount of votes, which explains why you need a witness and why you might want that third witness site if you have multiple sites where you're running Exchange, especially active copies. We looked at ways to break down those database copies. You know, everything from a simple 2 server with a witness up to a server with a disaster recovery site or 2 active sites. And remember, we added in for some additional resilience those lag copies, and we wanted to put those lag copies in for in case something went wrong and we needed to go back. And one of my favorite things is, remember, we got 14 days that we can go back on those lag copies. So you're pretty well covered. This is one of the reasons why Microsoft refers to a properly set up DAG as kind of like the zero backup strategy. And again, don't get me wrong, nobody's saying don't do an actual backup. It's just saying the whole point is to mitigate the ever needing to go to your backup. I mean, that's really cool. And then at the very end, we did another DAG demonstration, and I wanted to show you a common error that people run into with witnesses and that we solved. We solved. It was that Exchange Trusted Subsystem group, and we made ourselves a DAG and a DAG copy. And actually tied in with all of the previous 2 videos on planning your site resilience, your site awareness, all of the high availability features. You got to admit that, you know, as a whole package, you can go out now and set everything up. It's pretty amazing high availability features that you have. So once again, I really hope that this video has been informative for you, and I want to thank you for viewing.